A top quarterback prospect is injured. Who are the top 5 tight ends in the 2024 NFL draft class that we think will be in the draft? Who wants a mock draft? Everybody, right? We're going to give you one, but just for the top 10 picks. All that and more coming up next on the Draft Countdown Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown Podcast. I'm your co-host, Brian Bosarge, joined as always by my co-host, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, we are 182 days, 22 hours, 58 minutes away from the 2024 NFL Draft.
It feels like things are rounded into gear, Brian. I'm excited to talk with you today, hit tight ends, do a little mock draft. I think it's going to be a good episode. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, this might be the earliest live mock draft I think we've ever done. Granted, we're only going 10 picks deep on this one, so but still, if you're watching live here tonight in the chat and you have a question, we want us to answer it at the end of the episode, go ahead and drop it right there in the chat. Or if you're following along on Twitter, send the question there and we will answer it at the end of the episode, as well as on our Discord. If you are there, you can ask a question there as well. If you're not a member of Discord, go to draftcountdown.com. Top right corner of the search bar is a link to join the Discord channel. And as always, if you're new to this channel, like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and get notified when we go live each and every week to do this. Quickly, Shane, I mentioned a quarterback injury. I want to get this before we get into the rest of it. Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers, I think your number 3 quarterback prospect, AC injury there, shoulder injury. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, which is rough for him because he had a shoulder injury last year, not different shoulders ultimately. But, we had to keep seeing the progression from him, I think, to really, for me, to feel good about having him at number 3. The injury drops him down my list and makes me question, does he declare? Is he a first-round pick? And I think those questions start to happen if he doesn't come back and play really well at the end of the season.
Yeah, him not declaring would be interesting to see what happens there in Austin for sure.
He better somehow magically graduate and transfer. That's all I'll say.
There you go. All right, so let's dive into this. Right, we talked about it. We're gonna lead right into this. We're gonna give everybody a top 10 mock draft. And what does that mean? That means we're just gonna draft the first 10 picks of the draft as who they are listed right now. The order listed per Tankathon, how the top 10 goes out, and Shane's going to pick the odd number picks, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. I'll pick 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, and we'll go on. Which means, Shane, you'll get to pick twice for the same team tonight, so that's fun, right? Always good to get that symmetry. So let's get right in there. Number 1 pick in the draft, currently held by the Chicago Bears by way of the Carolina Panthers. I mean, I have a feeling where you're going here, right?
I don't think there's a question for the Bears here. I think Justin Fields has gotten a pretty raw deal. We both liked him as a prospect. I think he's gotten a pretty raw deal with Chicago. But when undrafted rookie free agent, your boy Brian Tyson Bagent now has matched the win total as a starting quarterback of Justin Fields this season, it's time to move on. Ryan Poles, the GM, did not select Justin Fields. So he gets a chance here if they get the number 1 pick through Carolina or themselves to take his quarterback. Whether Luke Getsy is still there as a head coach or not, it doesn't matter. I'm taking Caleb Williams, the quarterback out of Southern Cal. Has had a couple rough games. The Notre Dame game, probably the worst game of his college career. We know what Caleb Williams is. I think we know what he can do. The NFL throws he can make, the athleticism, the off-platform throws, can hit any area of the field. Has the arm strength, has the leadership qualities. And quite frankly, I don't think there's anything that he can't do. So Lincoln Riley quarterbacks have done well in the NFL. Caleb Williams goes to Chicago, and they trade Justin Fields.
Allow me to play devil's advocate here, because I throwed this graphic up in my prospect review article this week because I just found it interesting. And I don't have the data on every quarterback prospect that's come out in recent years to know how their splits were in this category as well. But prior to the Utah game, in which they lost this past week, Caleb Williams in 23 starts against non-top 25 teams, completing 70% of his passes for 317 yards a game, 78 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. In 5 starts against a top 25 opponent, Caleb Williams is only completing 51% of his passes with 172 yards per game, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Is that something to worry about?
I don't think it necessarily is, because that, ranges the length of time. And we've seen, bare bones USC in some of these games, right? I mean, the bowl game last season, the offensive line is really bad. The defense has continued to be really bad. Like, I don't think it's all on him. I'd be interested to see some of the other top, the Trevor Lawrence and the Andrew Lucks. I think it's to be interesting to figure some of that out to see what is that drop off. I think most quarterbacks would have some type of drop off, maybe not quite that massive. Right. So I think it's a little concern, but not enough to not take him at number 1.
Yeah, I mean, I would think some of the quarterbacks drafted recently, like a Tua Tagovailoa, for instance, or at Bryce Young, those drop-offs, all they played was top 25 teams for the most part, right? Joe Burrow, his senior year as well, I would imagine. But I would be curious to see the data. And I'm sure somebody out there's got this somewhere. Travis May, if you're listening, you're our numbers guy. Go get that stuff and let us know how it is. But Caleb Williams is the pick here and I think if the Chicago Bears have the number 1 pick, that is going to be what's going to happen, because obviously something is going to rise, especially if they're also picking at 3. So that brings me to the Arizona Cardinals at pick 2. And I am I really don't know how to go here, because I think Kyler Murray, they're going to keep him, right? I mean, he's probably going to play this week based off the practice report, right? He was a full go in practice, which I would tend to think he's probably going to start this week or at latest next week. And he's under contract for a lot of money for a lot more years. So
yeah,
I think if Caleb Williams is not on the table here, I don't think Drake May is going to be the pick at 2 for the Cardinals. So I start looking at upgrading wide receiver, maybe with Marvin Harrison Jr. Do you address the offensive line here? You did it with Paris Johnson last year. Do you come back and pair Paris Johnson, to replace DJ Humphries on the left side with Fashanu? I think you could make that argument, but for my personal, I think they go with Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver from Ohio State, are both of our number 1 wide receiver prospects, and I think both of our number 2 overall prospects in this class.
He is. I think it's a good pick. Arizona needs that stud receiver. If you're going to stick with Kyler Murray, get him the best wide receiver prospect, in my opinion, that we've had in a while. It's just super rare to have a wide receiver go number 2 overall.
Has it happened since Calvin Johnson?
It has not since Calvin Johnson, and even before that, I think it's there's. I can't remember the time before that it was I guess Charles Rogers, maybe. Yeah, he was number 2.
Yeah,
which didn't work out too well. But I wonder because wide receiver in this class is very deep. We talked about it last week. Will a team pull the trigger at number 2 on Marvin Harrison? I almost tend to think maybe we have him kind of too high. I don't think I'm going to move him. Like, I think he's going to be a great NFL player, but I don't have to make the pick at number 2. But it makes perfect sense for Arizona when you just drafted who's going to be your franchise left tackle next year in Paris Johnson. I don't see why you take another offensive tackle at 2.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where I was at here. Would make sense here at 3, though, maybe. If you're the Chicago Bears coming back up at 3 and you drafted your quarterback now, Caleb Williams, at 1. So, Shane, you're back on the clock here with the Bears and their own pick at pick 3. I mean, we could go a number of ways here, right? I mean, would Marvin Harrison be on the board if say the Cardinals did pass and Marvin Harrison was on the board? Is that that's an option for the Bears, right? But he's not on the board anymore. So where are you leaning here? Pick 3, Chicago Bears.
I think it's tricky. I think Harrison would be in the conversation. I do think people tend to overestimate the Bears picking a receiver. You have DJ Moore, who's very, very good. I think they'll take a receiver, maybe 2 in this draft, fairly highly. I don't think you need to take Marvin Harrison. Offensive tackle makes a lot of sense. I think the left tackle position for Chicago is not great. The one thing that holds me back from saying slam dunk, like this is what they'll do, is I think Ryan Poles is really happy that he took Braxton Jones in the 5th round and thinks he's a franchise left tackle. That's makes him look like a really good GM, right? Like, I think that he likes him a lot, and he just took Darnell Wright to man the right side. So I think there's a chance that they would pass on offensive tackle and take maybe a pass rusher, take Jerzon Newton from Illinois, or take Jared Verse or Laitu Latu, the Florida State, UCLA, respectively. I'm not quite there yet. Like, I don't feel good enough about any of those 3 prospects to say they're number 3 overall picks. And then we're taking a left tackle. Before last week, I would have said, okay, it's all Fashanu, right? Last week, Fashanu, and you'll get into this a little bit later, played a lot worse against Ohio State than Joe Alt from Notre Dame did. A lot worse in that second half. I'm still going to take Olu Fashanu, the left tackle from Penn State, here at 3 for the Bears, but I don't feel great about it. But I do think he's probably the best fit and has the longest consistency despite that game against Ohio State.
That's fair. I don't think he played as bad against Ohio State last week as you did per se, but he did have a couple of, at least 2, I know for sure, bad reps against JT Tuimoloau. I'm going to get that. I'm going to have to learn this at some point. But I still have Fashanu as the top offensive tackle in this class, and I believe number 3 overall on my board. So I like the pick of Fashanu here. I not saying that Braxton Jones maybe he can move inside if you like him as well. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I mean maybe.
The Bears defense is bad, so a pass rusher could have helped there as well. I could see that. All right, so that brings me now up to the pick 4 in the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton's first year, probably not going how Sean Payton thought his first year was going to go. In the Rocky Mountains there, Russell Wilson has played better, at least, right? I mean, not completely looking. He's Waffle House cooking now and not, cooking outside of over a open trash can.
Fair.
But I would have considered Fashanu here and to replace Garrett Bowles, and I could argue Joe Alt as well. But I think their defense needs a ton of help, and I'm going to draft a pass rusher I think is rising and has risen to now the number 1 edge spot on my board, and that's UCLA's Laiatu Latu. Nobody has won better rushing the passer this year than Latu has anybody else in the country. He's just dominating every single game for what has been a very good defense for UCLA.
I think it's fair. I mean, the Broncos defense needs more help than we expected them to need. The only issue I have with Latu is just, he's a fifth-year guy. He's an older guy. He's had injuries, but he has played the best of any edge rusher this year. So sometimes those older players, we saw with Jermaine Johnson, a while back,
they get pushed down a little bit.
They get pushed down
as we get closer. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as we are still a good 6 months out,
Hey, fair.
Right. All right. So let's move on now. Pick 5. Did we think the New York Giants would be at pick 5 before the season started?
No, those, starting to pick up a little bit of steam, I guess, of a 14-7 win against the Commanders counts. This is the easiest pick for me of outside of number 1. I'm taking Drake May, the quarterback from North Carolina here. I mean, Daniel Jones was pretty bad in the first couple games. I know they signed him to a contract, but it's not, this like actual long-term contract. So I think they can get out of it. Maybe he has to stick around for a year and kind of, learn that. But after 2024, they have an out of that contract. There you go. That's it. Daniel Jones can start the year. Drake May can learn for a little bit. I think Drake May struggled against Virginia a bit in that game. They lost. He's not this. I don't think he is on Caleb Williams' level, but he's definitely better than the rest of the quarterbacks in this class and has a ton of upside that demands a top 5 pick.
That's fair. So that brings me to another team that probably didn't think they'd be picking this high right now. It's the New England Patriots, and a team that maybe they would have considered Drake May if he was on the board.
Ran the card up there
pick 6, but Drake May is gone. I'm replacing Trent Brown here. Brown's been around the block for a while, right? He's been in the league a good amount of time. Since
he's been in the league a long time.
I'm trying to see when he was originally 15. No, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyway, he's old. So I'm going to replace Trent Brown here with Notre Dame offensive tackle Joe Alt. And because I don't necessarily like the wide receiver value that I could have got here at pick 6. So, and I don't necessarily think that they are going to actively be in the pass rusher market as they have spent some draft capital on that in recent years. So Joe Alt is who I settle on here at pick 6. Any other place we could have gone there?
No, I mean, that's definitely where I would have gone. Yeah. I mean, Trent Brown is 30 years old, but he's had a lot of injuries. He's not definitely playing.
Yeah, he's an old 30.
Right. So no, I think it's a great pick, and Joe Alt just feels like a Patriot, doesn't he? Like it feels perfect,
as much as anybody else does. All right, so 2 of our contributors at Draft Countdown, Miranda Wilhelm and Pigskin Paul, both crying right now as the Green Bay Packers are in the dumps. Right, we're sitting here at pick 7. The Green Bay on the clock. This will be the highest they picked in quite a while, right? So that doesn't feel great for Green Bay to be picking here at 7. We can't get a quarterback here either, right? Jordan Love ain't it. I think we're seeing that week-to-week basis. So I am anxious to see where you end up taking Green Bay here with their top pick.
It's tough. I don't think it's a great spot for them because I think offensive tackle is probably their biggest need, and they love an athletic offensive tackle. So I considered kind of the next couple on my board. I mean, Kingsley Somatea, I love out of BYU. It's too high for him. Marius Mims from Georgia, J.C. Latham from Alabama, I think are considerations for the Packers here. I just don't feel confident any of them are top 10 picks yet. I think one of them will be, at least one will be. I just don't know who it is yet. So I'm not quite there. Receiver, like you said, doesn't feel great past this. So I'm going to kind of go with the best player available. We know Jair Alexander's still great. Rasul Douglas is not. it at the opposite quarterback. He'll only have 1 year left on his contract. They really don't have much else in the cupboard at corner. So I'm going to take Kool-Aid McKinstry, the corner out of Alabama, here at 7 for the Packers. Like, I don't love it because the offense needs the help, but it feels like a Packers move to just not take that.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, they've added some good passers, Rashawn Gary, right, and the last couple of years. So I can see why you pass on that aspect of it, and the values just doesn't add up there with wide receiver or offensive tackle here at pick 7. So I'm with you. I think Kool-Aid is the guy to go there, and somebody I definitely would have considered on the next spot, which is pick 8 here in the Los Angeles Chargers. I think they would have considered Kool-Aid McKinstry there. And I don't have I released my new top 150. The only other corner I have is Cooper DeJean at 20 overall. So the value 20th overall player, pick 8, doesn't add up. So I am left spinning my wheels here, and I don't know if this is the wise way to go, but because you just drafted another weapon for Herbert in last year's first round, but that's where I'm going to go here because like I said, I bet just add talent, right? Just add talent around Justin Herbert, and I think they draft Georgia tight end Brock Bowers at pick 8.
Wow. I mean, Quentin Johnston has not exactly had a stellar rookie year either.
I'm not quitting him yet, though.
I know, but Mike Williams went down. I'm like, oh, here we go. Here comes Quentin Johnston.
One target.
Yeah, still can't get it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing where we're kind of hitting a point, and this is what happens in October, where
right.
I don't think there's any top 10 picks left in this draft. Like Brock Bowers, I love Brock Bowers. Now with the tightrope surgery, I don't think it affects the draft stock much. He's not a top 10 pick. Like, he's not a big tight end that's, super athletic. Like, I don't think he'll be a top 10 pick. But, yeah, he's up there on my board because I think he's that talented, and it's kind of where you're at to make that move.
Well, let me ask you this, though. So let's talk about Brock Bowers. You know what? We'll save that for the tight end segment.
Yeah,
think about it. That's fair. All right, so let's move on. Shane, your last pick here in the top 10 is pick 9, and the Tennessee Titans. They're going to end up picking higher than 9th.
We were talking on the W Marketplace podcast how the Steelers will beat the Jaguars this week, then lose to the Titans on Thursday Night Football next week. So just get ready for that.
Sure. Is Will Levis going to be the starting quarterback next Thursday? Because he is starting this Sunday.
Yeah, look, they said they might go with a 2 quarterback system this week, so we'll see.
Really?
Maybe get Malik Willis and Will Levis.
Or are we trying? We're going to do this in the NFL. We're going to Steve Spurrier quarterbacks out on. Okay.
Hey, Kansas State, it's working for. So Tennessee.
Atlanta's going to romp in this game at this point.
if they do that, I don't know how true it is, but
I mean, they may do that anyway. So where are we going here with the Titans?
Like, I'm trying to stall a little bit because I don't love the value here in terms of matching Tennessee's needs. Because I think their front 7 on the defensive side's pretty good. But that's really where the value is here. Offensive tackle, still need a right tackle. Don't really have one. They could use a receiver. I don't think there's anyone here I feel confident taking. So I think I'm going to go pass rusher here. Like, Harold Landry is very good. Arden Keys played decently on the other side, but I think having a little more pass rush can never be a bad thing and help this defense out. I always feel like I never know who to take for Tennessee, but I'm going to take Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State. It was pretty close between him and Dallas Turner. I think Turner will be a little more athletic. I think teams will like Verse's toughness a little bit more. I think he's going to fit, what the Tennessee Titans do and what Mike Vrabel wants that defense to be a little bit more.
That's fair. I like the pick.
It's a tough. Tennessee's always tough for me to mock, and this is a tough spot for their needs. So I hope they pick higher, so I can just take a right tackle for them or whatever.
Yeah, be a lot easier if they were up further up the board to match the pick number and the value. All right, so let's wrap up this top 10. A team I'm not necessarily sure is going to end up in the top 10. I think they're going to play their way into that 14 to 15 range because I feel like they're too good to pick in the top 10, but not good enough to make the playoffs. I think they're in playoff purgatory perennially at this point now by Mickey's constant can kicking down the road that he does each and every year with the salary cap. This is where they are. But if they are indeed picking the top 10, I immediately jumped out. I was like, they're going to draft an offensive lineman, right? Because they're going to give up on Penning already, as they seemingly have. He's like third on the depth chart right now at left tackle. They're starting James Hurst.
Wild.
And I completely whiffed on Trevor Penning. Unless he figures it out, I thought he would be a dominant tackle in the NFL. But, goes to show you. So I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball here, and I'm going to give them an edge guy, but I'm going to bypass a couple of guys I have rated higher to go with a guy I think fits their defensive scheme more. And I think if you're looking to replace Cameron Jordan, you need to get somebody of similar size and, ability. So I'm going to say at the 10th pick, the Saints take Ohio State edge rusher JT Tuimoloau at the 10th pick.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that would be interesting. I think this week he kind of turned it on against Penn State in a big game. I think that could help his draft stock. He's very hot and cold. So I could see it. I could see it happening. And I definitely like the fit with the Saints because similar thing. He feels kind of like a Saints defender.
Yeah. I mean, he has that. I mean, they have a type. Right on that side with Tano Passanio, they've signed as a free agent, and some other guys they brought in. He's definitely. I mean, they've just extended Curtis Granderson on the other side. So, and they drafted who did they draft this past year? Foskey from Notre Dame.
Yeah,
you drafted Brzee in the first round for the inside. I think that a guy like Tuimoloau would fit great there in New Orleans. So that's going to wrap up our top 10 mock draft. I'll briefly recap it here. First pick, Chicago Bears by way of Carolina. Caleb Williams, quarterback Southern Cal. Number 2, Arizona takes Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver, Ohio State. 3, Chicago takes Olu Fashanu, offensive tackle, Penn State. 4, Denver takes Laiatu Latu, edge rusher, UCLA. 5, the New York Giants take Drake May, quarterback, North Carolina. 6, New England takes Joe Alt, offensive tackle, Notre Dame. 7, Green Bay takes Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback, Alabama. 8, Chargers take Brock Bowers, tight end, Georgia. 9, Tennessee takes Jared Verse, edge rusher, Florida State. And 10, New Orleans takes Ohio State edge rusher JT Tuimoloau. There you go.
I dig it. That's a good. We'll have to go back to this and see if we got any right.
How that looks.
Yeah. How that looks.
I'm more curious to see how the draft order looks, towards the end of the season. All right. We're not going to take a whole lot of time on this because it's fantasy spewing here, but the NFL trade deadline is Tuesday at 4 Eastern. Just quickly, Shane, is there any trades that any players you expect to be moved?
I don't know if there's anyone I expect. I would say it seems like we're going to get some Denver Broncos. Like, I think Jerry Jeudy is probably one that they've been trying to push on other teams. So I wonder if the Broncos just take less and, move him. The other guy that I think is interesting is just seeing the usage is Antonio Gibson, the running back for the Washington Commanders. Chris Rodriguez got basically the snaps for Gibson last week. Seems like he could be, a guy on the move. So I'd expect that. And, you wonder if the Panthers regret not trading Brian Burns last year. They got some pretty hefty offers. You've talked about it on here before, Brian. So I wonder if maybe they finally pull the trigger and make that move. You have won a game. Like, just give it up. You're not getting 2 first-round picks anymore from the Rams. So see what you can get.
Yeah, I heard they were taking calls on Jeremy Chin and a few others, but Chin's out for a while now, so that's not going to happen. But we'll be curious. Is there what? I'll tell you. I'll look at this through the lens of our favorite teams. Is there a move that you would like to see the Steelers make prior to the deadline?
Like the move I would like to see the Steelers make versus the move the Steelers would make are 2 very different things. So I mean, the Chase Claypool trade surprised me because usually the Steelers aren't the ones giving up someone at the trade deadline. I mean, ultimately, that's what I would like for them to do. Like, I don't think the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl this year. Spoiler. So if they can move a Deontay Johnson, someone like that, I think it's worth doing. I don't think they're going to make any move.
I would like to see, you mentioned Antonio Gibson. I wouldn't mind seeing the Bengals get in on that as a third down back role, or more specifically, I would like to see them get something out of the tight end position, but I don't even know who you would acquire in that market.
Zach Ertz, maybe. I mean, Trey McBride's going to start this week. Maybe he could be a nice short-term Band-Aid tight end.
Sure. I mean, I would be open to anything at this point, but the Bengals will not. They're not going to make any trades.
Right. Yeah.
It's just what they do. So it's what they do, or what they don't do, I should say. All right. So let's look back at week 8, and in this segment every week we talk about the best offensive and defensive players that we watched in the 4 games that we each watched officially last week, and I'll lead off with the best offensive player I watched this week. We've talked about him multiple times already, and it is Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., who basically took a NFL prospect in Kalen King and made him look like a NAIA walk-on. Marvin Harrison Jr. was targeted 16 times against Penn State, caught 11 of those for 162 yards and a score. Probably could have amplified that number up a bit if some passes were a bit more on target, if you will. But when he's on, he's the best wide receiver in college football and going to be a top NFL draft pick, right?
He was almost open every play. I mean, he was getting open against King one-on-one. Just they thought, I don't know what they thought they could just cover him with King and be fine, but it did not work.
What makes him so great, I think, is he lines up everywhere, right? He beats you on the outside, on either side. He beats you in the slot. It doesn't matter. You line him up, he's going to beat you, and that's just what makes it so great. Him week in, week out. This one's going to hurt you a little bit, Shane. Who was the best offensive player you watched this week?
In more ways than one, this one's going to hurt me. But my best offensive player was J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback for Michigan. When we talked about our quarterbacks, talked about how I was a little bit lower on him. I'm an Ohio State alumni, so those Michigan guys sometimes don't want to honor. And it was my lock of the week that he just completely obliterated from me. But, I mean, McCarthy's playing against Michigan State. They're not good. But he had multiple NFL throws, 1 touchdown between 2 defenders, just perfect angle for the pass to get it to where his receiver could make the catch. There's a lot of kind of short passes to Roman Wilson, letting Roman Wilson run wild for some yardage that gets tacked on. But I thought McCarthy looked the part. So I really that 3 to 5 quarterback range. I mean, he could be quarterback 3 for me at this point. I don't feel confident that he's like going to be a great NFL quarterback, a top 10 pick or anything, but I see the traits and see the ability. We'll see how the Penn State and Ohio State games go for him. Especially amid the Michigan scandal, if that affects anything.
So yeah, the top prospect for me on the defensive side of the ball, your Ohio State Buckeyes again. and it was edge rusher that we've already mentioned, JT Tuimoloau, was the top defense player for me. Mostly rushed off the right tackle for most of the game from what I saw, but he got the best of Olu Fashanu, who I think is a top 3 prospect in this class right now. And he got the best of him on at least 2 reps that I saw for sure. One on it was a 4th and 3 play. He basically forced an incomplete pass, and another one he just straight walked Fashanu back into the quarterback, and I think somebody else finished up the sack. So, he was a dominant player in this game for me.
Yeah, and look, I think Fashanu had him in the first half, plenty.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a bad second half for Fashanu, and good for Tumo. Wow, he has those traits. It's just like when it comes out, that's the question.
Who was the best defensive player you watched this week?
I'll go with Chris Braswell, the edge rusher from Alabama. Dallas Turner gets the hype, probably will be picked higher, but Chris Braswell's playing better than Dallas Turner is on that Alabama defense. This is what makes the defense runs. They have 2 elite edge rushers, 2 sacks against Tennessee, and it was against Joe Milton, who can break some sacks. If there's one thing Joe Milton can do, it's not much, but the one thing he can do is not go down with his big frame. I mean, Braswell was coming at him, good wrap-up tackling, forced the fumble on one of those sacks. Just a great first step, great awareness. I mean, he was reading what the offensive lineman was doing, different pass rush moves. I was super impressed. I think Braswell has a first-round shot.
Another thing that impresses me about Braswell and will help his draft stock is he's a special teams guy too.
Yes.
And he makes big plays on special teams. Was it in this game he blocked a field goal or blocked an extra point? I can't remember.
A couple games ago, yeah.
I remember seeing it, but I couldn't remember when it was. But yeah, I mean, he's that kind of guy, and NFL teams are going to love that. Even if he's not a first-round pick, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that gets you put in that early second-round range.
Yeah.
So yeah, good guy there, Chris Braswell. Big numbers this year. All right, let's move on to week 9 and 8 games on the docket this week for us. And we're going to start tomorrow night on ESPN2 with Georgia State and Georgia Southern. I'm going back to the old Sun Belt roots here. I hadn't been there in a few weeks, so I figured I'd jump back in. And it's not a lot in this game, to be honest. Anxious. I want to get a look at maybe a lower round tight end prospect, Keaton Upshaw, Georgia Southern. Get a look at him. I watched Georgia State earlier this season, and jumping out to me in that game was their corner, Bryquise Brown, a 6'1", 186 corner. Maybe not in this draft class, but a name to know.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good game. Both teams are pretty good. I also like Caleb Hood, receiver for Georgia Southern, probably more special teams guy, but he's having a good season. And Jalen White, the running back, might be someone down the line that undrafted free agent that makes the team.
Another game I'm watching tomorrow night at 6:30 on ESPN is Syracuse at Virginia Tech. I caught some Virginia Tech earlier this season, I believe against Old Dominion. So anxious to get back there again. I don't think Grant Wells is going to play their quarterback. Not that he's any great shakes about him as a prospect, but they have some wide receivers that are interesting in Allie Jennings, who I think is also injured, and Jalen Lane, their other wide receiver, who may or may not be injured. I can't remember. But one player that is not injured heck, he might be. I don't know. But he stood out to me in that first game I saw was the Florida transfer edge rusher Antoine Powell-Ryland, 6'2", 245. Had a big game against Old Dominion, so anxious to see him again. And for Syracuse, who are some Marlo Wax, their linebacker, stands out, but anybody else on their team that you like?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably the top guy. I always like Stephon Thompson, their linebacker, but his play's kind of fallen off, and Rondé Gadsden the second, their tight end receivers out for the year. So Syracuse, it's been tough goings for them.
Yeah, Garrett Schrader's kind of regressed. He looked like he was developing into a little something last year, but not there. This is probably Dino Baber's last ride there, maybe.
Yeah, it should be.
He'll be a good OC somewhere, though.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Saturday games now. 11 a.m. on CBS. Shane, you'll be watching Indiana and Penn State. We've talked about Penn State a good bit here. Anxious to see the injury status of Chop Robinson. He left that game against Ohio State. I don't. Has there been an update on his status?
I have not seen anything about if he's going to play this week or not. So we'll see what happens.
Indiana's got a few guys maybe to watch out for here. I think I remember last year Aaron Casey, their linebacker, was a solid prospect. Anybody else here for the Hoosiers and Penn State you want to talk about?
Yeah, not much for Indiana. Matthew Bedford, their offensive tackle, I like a little bit as maybe a late round, undrafted free agent type. Penn State, definitely I want to watch the pass rushers on the other side of Chop Robinson playing. Adisa Isaac really moving up the boards. I thought he looked at it against Ohio State as well. And maybe a little like late round sleeper. Tyler Warren, their tight end, is a nice, really good blocker. One of those kind of tight ends that gets drafted and you're like, wait, what? What happened? But gets drafted on blocking.
Yeah, I moved Isaac into my top 100 on my board this week. He's been really impressive this season. All right, let's move on now. Game I'll be watching at 11 a.m. on the ACC network. UConn at Boston College. The main takeaways from this one, it's not a pretty game here to watch, right? This is the when your main takeaways are, hey, let's watch guards.
Yes.
That's what you're getting in this game. Boston College's Christian Mahogany is the go-to name there. And for UConn, I mean, we could be looking at a top 100 guy here with Christian Haynes, their interior offensive lineman.
Yeah. I mean, both those guys could be second round picks, so it is worth watching the guards. I also like UConn linebacker Jackson Mitchell a lot.
Very active player, yeah.
Very active, ton of tackles. Nice day 3 pick. Boston College is a fun team to watch, not necessarily from a draft perspective right now.
Nothing surprises me anymore when I come across our games that go on this watch list here. And then I see Shane, 12 noon on ESPN Plus, Holy Cross at Fordham. Where is Holy Cross located? They're in Massachusetts, right? I'm guessing Massachusetts.
That's probably fair. I was, it's wherever's holy, so that's what you want.
I know Fordham's in the Bronx. I know where that is.
Yeah, Massachusetts, really crowded. I just Googled it to make sure.
All right, so there's some prospects in this game, right? To watch, and I get why you got to hear Fordham wide receiver. Let's see how I do here. Fotis Coco Saluis.
Oh, I think that's good. I'm giving you points for that one.
They also have another guy, MJ Wright, at wide receiver on the watch list. I think both those guys were on the Shrine list. Is how they ended up on our watch list, if I had to guess. Holy Cross linebacker Jacob Dobbs, I think, is a guy to watch, and Matthew Sluka, their quarterback, 5th-year player, 6'1", 215.
Yeah, he might make something. Jalen Coker, their receivers, getting a lot of buzz, is maybe one of the top small school receivers, 6'3", 207, probably 4'5", speed. And then I got a name of a player. It's not on our watch list that I want to watch and see if he should be, is their offensive guard, CJ Hansen. So I'll report back. We'll see if we add him or if he's not good and then we shouldn't add him. But Holy Cross looks to be actually one of the top small schools for the draft this year.
Didn't see that coming.
Me either. So there you go.
2:30 p.m. on NBC, Pitt at Notre Dame. My first venture into Notre Dame this season. We've talked about him a lot. So I will get to see Sam Hartman and that crew, Joe Alt, how they do. And maybe Joe Alt gets matched up with Dayan Hayes on our watch list for Pitt. We've talked about them. A guy that for Pitt that I really see his name is popping up a lot here lately is their corner, MJ Devonshire, picking up a lot of buzz.
Yeah, I've really liked his career. I mean, he's a playmaker. Devonshire is good. Matt Goncalves, their offensive tackle, has filled in nicely there. He's maybe a draftable prospect. And watch out for Bub Means, their receiver for Pitt. Was on the freak list. He's definitely interesting. But you could see Howard Cross the third, right, getting buzz for Notre Dame, the defensive lineman.
That's right.
We'll see what he does.
We didn't talk about him when we talked about running backs, but Audric Estime, does he do it for you?
No,
let's move on.
He doesn't.
That's all I needed to hear. 6 p.m. on FS1, Shane, you'll be watching Washington at Stanford, and I'm tragically going to have to report here. I think a guy that we're going to talk about a little bit later may not play in this game. Stanford tight end Benjamin Urasek looks like he's going to be out of this one, and that kind of sucks because I'm not sure there's many other prospects on this Stanford roster that are draftable.
Well, we got one other. We got one other that's definitely get drafted, Brian.
Who's that?
Kicker Joshua Carty is getting drafted.
That's true.
Stanford, my kicker won, so you had to watch him.
Kicker won. It's too soon to talk about kickers, Shane.
I know.
We've been through this.
We've
been through this. But this is all about Washington, right? And getting another look at these studs. Washington, they're going to be one of the higher represented teams in the 2024 draft class, right? I think on just sheer volume, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, they all came back for this, right? For this run.
For this run.
Almost lost Arizona State last week. I mean, it was not great.
I called that, and I
you did.
I was so mad that I did not make that my lock.
But I did said it on the show, though.
I did say it on the show that I like that number because I thought they left it all on the field against Oregon. So,
yeah, but we'll see. We'll see Michael Penix. We'll see Romeo Dunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, the receivers there. Giles Jackson, we mentioned, is back. Also, they could have 4 receivers drafted. If I'm not sure, Jalen Polk
is McMillan going to play this week?
I think it's 50-50, so I'm really hoping that we get to see him. But I also like Troy Fatanu, the offensive guard for them. I think he's a draftable prospect. The edge rushers for Washington haven't played as well as I've hoped in Braylon Trice and Zion Tupula Fatui. We'll see if they can bounce back this
But the
week.
talent is there. It's
just
they're not producing.
Haven't looked good. I don't know why.
Numbers aren't there this year. We haven't talked about him, and we're not going to talk about him in our tight ends tonight either. So I'm going to mention his name because they have 4 draftable wide receivers. He doesn't get a whole lot of targets in that offense. I really like Devin Culp, their tight end, but he just doesn't get the targets because,
why? Yeah, well,
why would you at this point? So it sucks for him, but he could be a guy that ends up popping. Maybe as a undrafted, a priority free agent, or maybe even like you mentioned the tight end Penn State earlier. This guy gets drafted in 6th, 7th. Well, man, this guy caught 6 balls all year. Why is he getting drafted? Man's good. Just didn't get the target share because you had 4 top 100 receivers on their team. So it's wild. This is one I'm interested in. I got some questions for you on this one. Your last game here, ESPN2, 7 p.m., Cincinnati at Oklahoma State. We don't generally ask questions about the 2025 draft class, but I do have one here. But first, is it Colin Oliver, their edge rusher? I think you're high on him, right?
Yeah, and he's one of those kind of holdovers for me from as a freshman. He played extremely well, and then kind of fell off last year, and now he's picking it back up again. I like Colin Oliver, a little undersized, but really good at getting to the quarterback, and he playing the run really well this year. So I'm going to take the W. I think he's going to, could be a day 2 pick.
Maybe not in this year's class, though. Probably not.
Yeah, I would expect him to go back to school, but he's only a third-year player.
He's going to join the 2025 draft class with, you mentioned, could be RB1 next year. Is it Ollie Collins? Is that his name?
Ollie Gordon.
Yeah. Ollie Gordon, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, he's
So here's the Debbie segment, everybody.
There you go. Like he's having an incredible season. Last week against West Virginia ran for 282 yards and 4 touchdowns, and he caught against Kansas. He had 100 yards rushing, 100 yards receiving. Like he's setting. If Barry Sanders hadn't gone to Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon would be setting records right now. Look, is fast, can catch, like does everything really well. So I think he's a lot of people, have Nick Singleton and Penn State, the Penn State running backs, these guys, but Ollie Gordon might be the best in that class.
Yes. Sorry, everybody who thinks they're going to go to Oklahoma State and break a record. That just ain't happening.
Right? Yeah, you just can't do it. But
all right, that's going to end our Week 9 college football preview. That's good stuff. All right, Shane, come on, man. Come on. Is this 5 in a row now? 4 in a row?
4 in a row. 4
in a row, Shane. You took the L here. 3-6, man. We got to get you back to 500 by the end of the season, man. So the ship riding starts tonight.
All right.
Who is the lock of the week?
Look, I'm gonna the last one that I won. I bet against Georgia because I don't think they're as good as Vegas thinks they are, or the public thinks they are. So I'm doing it again. I'm going back to the well. Florida plus 14.5. Graham Mertz has played pretty well. I think Florida has the run game to maybe do a little damage, score some points, maybe create a turnover. No Brock Bowers. I don't trust the Georgia offense. I don't trust the Georgia team at this point. I think Florida's not going to win this game, but I think they can keep it within 2 touchdowns. Maybe.
It's not 42.5 like it was the last time you picked against.
No. I wish it was. I would be much happier.
Well, yeah, I think we definitely could get on board with that. All right, so I'm going back to my roots here, and I'm going back to the Sun Belt, and I feel like I've gotten away from it, and I'm heading back there to some good old Southern football here. I think Troy's one of the best teams in the Sun Belt, and they're playing at Texas State, who can score. Texas State scores some points. But Troy, I like this number better yesterday when it was 4.5. It's up to 5.5 now. I still like it. Give me Troy minus 5.5 at Texas State and heading into a short week next week.
I'm going to tell you why it's a good pick, because I considered taking Texas State plus 5.5. So with how my locks are going, I think that makes it a good pick for you.
Fade Shane is the message we're sending out to everybody.
I asked everyone last week. Please do it this week.
I should have listened.
Yeah. This week,
I may do it this week, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, then I'll finally hit. So please, I'm begging you.
All right. Let's move on now to our position rankings segment this week, and we're going tight ends this week. And I almost feel like we could have lumped them into the wide receiver segment last week, because this is not the 2023 NFL draft class at the tight end position. No. We're not getting anybody's hopes up here. I don't even know if there's a Sam Laporta that a second round guy that's going to come in and have a big impact right away. But let's get the easy one out first, and we're both going to have the same number one here, and it's going to be Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. He's may not play again the rest of the season. He had the tightrope surgery on his ankle. The cons here are, he's not the traditional tight end size, right? 6'3", 225, but he blocks like a 270-pound tight end. So that's not an issue for me. He can run after the catch. He can make contested catches all day long. I don't see a difference here of what he can do, other than he's not going to run freak speed probably.
Right. But they run reverses with him. Like he has some. There's probably some good GPS numbers for Brock Bowers. But if he comes in the 220s, it's probably not going to be out of this world. Yeah, I don't know if he's a top 10 pick. I think he's a mid first round pick, but I think he's going to be a really good NFL player. I tweeted it last September. I think he's going to be what we wanted Kyle Pitts to be, because I think Bowers is a weapon that you can move around and do so many different things with, because he is a little bit smaller and a little more athletic with and how he works. You can run some of those, reverses and things. I think it's just going to be he's going to be a phenomenal NFL weapon.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Number 2 is going to come in different because I think we would have had the same number 2 had I thought. I just don't think Jatavian Sanders from Texas is going to declare for the draft. I'm assuming he's your number 2.
Yes.
So I'll let you go ahead and talk about him since I'm not going to.
JT Sanders from Texas is just a super athletic, tight end. That's what the NFL likes. I do think he declares that he's not having maybe the season in terms of statistics that you maybe wanted. That's not what's getting him drafted to the NFL. It's being a high-end athlete who's playing the tight end position, who's playing receiver. He's played special teams. He's had some of these big seasons in the past. I think JT Sanders from Texas is not a first-round pick, but I think he's an early day 2 pick. And with this tight end class, I mean, I'd be saying you got to just declare, just declare like you're going to be the tight end 2 by default. So yeah, I think he comes out.
My tight end 2, based off of not thinking that Sanders will declare, is Jaheim Bell from Florida State. He's another chess piece, right, on offense. He can line up at running back. He can line up at fullback. He can line up at H-back. He can line up in line. He can line up out wide. Jaheim Bell can do every single thing that an offensive coordinator, I would say an offensive coordinator's matchup dream is Bell, and he's a high-end athlete to boot. I think his game has taken off even more this year at Florida State. Sad as that makes me, to say that South Carolina could not exploit all of that instead of having him be the number 1 running back on their team. Don't get me wrong. Anyway. But Jaheim Bell, I think is that athlete. I love him in this class, and he's for this purpose of this exercise is I think the number 2 tight end in this class.
He's my number 4. So yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said. We've seen some big plays from him this season, but also some games where he's done nothing. I think Jaheim Bell's gonna be more of an H-back and only fit certain systems, pushes him down, but I think he's better than a lot of the tight ends in the class. So I'm with you.
Yeah, we're grasping at straws here at some point. I think my number 3 tight end in this group is, we talked about him briefly earlier, is Benjamin Yurosek from Stanford. I think he's the next in line of the Stanford tight end, 6'5", 231. I mean, he's got the size. He can make the jump balls. He can stretch the seam. He's not fast, right? He's a big body, but he's a good route runner, has good hands, has had some injury issues that concern me a little bit. But I think compared to some of the other guys that I have behind him, I think he just kind of stands out. If you told me that only 3 tight ends got drafted in the first 2 days, I'm kind of there right now.
Yeah, I think it's a real possibility. I just wish he was more of a red zone guy. I think he has like 5 touchdowns for his career. That's what holds me back with the injuries for Yurosek. He's tight end 8 on my board. But if he does declare, I think there's some guys in front of him that won't, and he might go back to school too.
Right. Who's number 3 on your board?
My number 3 is Cade Stover, the tight end for Ohio State. I think he is playing his way into that weird day 2 tight end who is tough, can block, and makes those tough first down catches. Has been used heavily in this offense for most of the season and had some really big catches last year too. So I think Cade Stover is the type of tight end that like draft guys don't love, fantasy guys don't love, but the NFL wants on their team to be their tight end too. And he steps in and can Dalton Schultz it if push comes to shove.
He's my tight end 4. How does he compare to some of those other Ohio State tight ends that probably shouldn't have been 2nd or 3rd round picks that ended up there, like Nick Vanette and some of those other guys?
I think he's better because he's more productive than Jeremy Ruckert and Nick Vanette and guys that were ultimately overdrafted. Like, Cade Stover's second in the team in receptions, only to Marvin Harrison. We haven't seen that from Ohio State tight end before. So, he has 27 catches. Jeremy Ruckert never had that in a season, and we still have half a season to go.
Yeah, he had a pretty big game this past week too against Penn State. So, and he seems to make the plays when the team needs him. Right, red zone, third down. He's almost like a security blanket for McCord.
He's the guy. I think that's man. So many NFL teams
that'll go a long way, right? In those war rooms.
Yeah.
Stover's number 4 on my list. You said Jaheim Bell was 4 on your list, so that brings us to tight end 5, and mine is going to be way out of left field here. So I'm going to go to you first because you probably have a much more rational way of thinking.
I don't, because there's just not a tight end 5. Like, it's just not, right? So I'm going to take Brevin Spann-Ford, the tight end from Minnesota, who, Minnesota's offense is so bad.
So bad.
But, he literally has 13 catches for 66 yards this year.
But he's huge.
But he's huge. He is 6'7", 270. He's going to run a 4.6. Like, he's very athletic, very big. He can be a dominant blocker. I think it makes him a draft pick, and like that's good enough for tight end 5. Like I said, my tight end 6 through 14. I don't even know if any of them are in the class when all's said and done.
My tight end 5 is South Carolina tight end Trey Knox, who has a.
I should have known.
Well, you probably could have guessed this, but to his credit, he has emerged as a weapon in their offense, and Spencer Rattler really depends on him. He can run after the catch. He's a former wide receiver, so he's good in the open field. He's really worked hard and has become a solid blocker out in both the run game and the passing game when called upon. And just there's a lack of options out there right now, right? And I think a guy who's going to test well, I believe, when push comes to shove at that position, I think Knox can end up in the top 5, maybe top 8 tight end range, day 3 pick. He's going to play special teams as well. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And I hate the fact that we're talking top 5 at a position. And my first immediate thought is, well, the guy's going to help on special teams, right? There's a whole lot of tight end 2s in this class.
Yeah,
there ain't a lot of tight end 1s. Some guys that I think could work their way in at some point if they declare Jake Briningstool from Clemson. I caught my first glimpse of him this week. He was big, but he's only a third-year player. I think he goes back. He's also undersized. Bryson Nesbitt, North Carolina, is a guy I think solid. Dallin Holker, Colorado State, is another guy that I think is going to push his way up the board for lack of options.
I'll toss out the Iowa tight ends. Both of them are out for the year, but Luke Lachey is a Sam Laporta. He just has barely played this year. And then Eric All, who transferred from Michigan, stepped in, was having a beast year, and he's out for the year
with the ACL. So that just pushes both those guys down or off the board completely.
Yeah, it just makes it tough. Ben Sinnott from Kansas State's having a good year. Jared Wiley from TCU.
Another guy who's just constantly injured is Brant Kuthi from Utah, who I think is a guy we could have very easily talked about. I want to throw out one more name here, because when I watched West Virginia a few weeks ago, this guy was an animal, and he's only a 4th-year player, so I think he's going to go back. But he's 6'7", 243. Cole Taylor, West Virginia. I don't know how much you've watched of him, Shane, but he's a really good guy, a really good player, and I think he's a guy who could make some noise probably in the 2025 class.
Yeah, I'll have to keep that name in mind. I don't have many notes on him, it doesn't seem like, so I'll have to check
he wasn't on our watch. I added him a few weeks ago to the watch list when I watched West Virginia play. So, all right. So that's going to do it for the tight end rankings here. We had one question on Twitter. Our good friend Bubba at Bubba's Cruising asked, he was counting on Georgia wide receiver Ladd McConkey being the first player from his small town to play in the NFL, but he's been bothered by a back injury this year. Then I see y'all both have him ranked lower than wide receiver 25. What round are we thinking if he comes out for Ladd McConkey?
I mean, the back injury hurts. Like he will play in the NFL. Like he will still be the first person from your town to play in the NFL. I don't think he gets drafted at this point unless he really can turn it on here at the end of the season and the playoff and, do some big things. Like he could have been a lot of people were expecting a solid athlete who was kind of that, reliable receiver, and just didn't happen this year for him. I don't know. I see an undrafted free agent that maybe makes some noise in the NFL and makes a team that has some stats.
I don't think we've ever talked about this, but so who is the best, if any, NFL player from your high school?
Oh God, from where I graduated from?
Yeah.
Let's see. I remember being in high school, and like the first ever player for my high school was like signed and played in the preseason for the Steelers. So like we're in a great football school. But I went to high school with the Ventrones. So with Ross Ventrone and who played for the New England Patriots, and so that they have been, they've been kind of the only guys. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else, but I think that's it. Ray Ventrone and Bubba Ventrone now as a coach is starting to get some head coach buzz. So
there you go. For me, it's going to be Antoine Odom, edge rusher. Played for the Titans and then signed with the Bengals. Became a lot more Bengal jerseys and Bengal stuff in my part of the world whenever he signed with them. You don't see it much anymore. Just me. It's back to being just me again. But yeah, Antoine Odom had a decent career in the NFL.
That's a pretty good one. I know who Antoine Odom is, so that's pretty good.
There you go. All right, so that's going to do it for tonight's episode of the show. Final thoughts, Shane, on which I kind of knew it was going to go long. We added a mock draft to the show this week.
It wasn't too bad for having a mock draft to the show. So thanks for sticking with us. I'm excited. I'm excited for the end of the season. I'm excited to watch more small school guys. I have kind of a list I want to get into here coming up. So excited for that.
Yeah. Released today. I released my big board went up to 150 today. Pretty happy about it. I think it's very, very wide receiver and edge heavy in the top 30. If you're looking at that, as a matter of fact, I think I have 3 edge rushers in the top 6. So I like this edge class. I like the wide receiver class, and it really shows on my big board today that came out today. So that's going to do it for tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown podcast. If you're following on live and you're new to the channel, like I said, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like the video, share it out. If you're listening to this on an audio platform, be it Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, share that out as well. We would love to get those numbers up to a much more wider audience, and we can only do that with your help. You can follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. You can follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Howell, and follow Draft Countdown there at Draft Countdown. And for all of your NFL draft needs, go to draftcountdown.com. For Shane, I'm Brian. Good night, everybody.